Hey guys, my name is Fox, and welcome to something that is a little bit different. So, for starters, I have to say I'm sorry that I've been dark for a little bit of a while. I'm sorry that I've been dark for a little bit of a while. There's just been a lot going on. I've been really, really busy, and I haven't really I've had the time to record videos, I just haven't really felt like it lately. I'm hoping to remedy that, and once I get a little bit of more time to do it, and like more, just motivation right now. That's the thing about having anxiety and all this other shit. Like, it's just hard to sometimes to find the motivation. So, but I'm here, and I wanted to do something a little bit different. I was hoping that an idea like this, a series like this, just talking about things, discussion, would be interesting along with Let's Plays. I like doing Let's Plays, but I also like discussing different things with people. Like, I like discussing different opinions, and I like getting to know what you guys think. So that's what this series is going to be about. I'm going to be doing a things I like sort of thing, things I want to that I enjoy wholeheartedly and want to introduce you to, and a thoughts on series, similar in the way that Your Movie Sucks does a thoughts on series for things that he doesn't necessarily hate, but things that he wants to discuss and things that he wants to tell you about, like his opinion on. So today, I thought it would be appropriate to do the Assassin's Creed series, because last night I went to go see the Assassin's Creed movie with one of my big brothers, and I have thoughts on that, so I'm not going to tell you the thoughts on that till the end of the video. For starters, I felt it was necessary to go through the series itself and sort of discuss my thoughts on the series myself, because I've been a fan of the series ever since Revelations came out. I know that's a little bit late into the series, but that's the one about the time where I started to get into it. So, basically, I'm going to go through game by game, and all the games that I've played, though, because if you know anything about Assassin's Creed, you know that they like to release a whole fuck ton of them. They release not only games for the main series, but all these other side games, and honestly, as big of a fan of Assassin's Creed that I am, yes, I am a fan, I just spoiled it, as big of a fan of Assassin's Creed as I am, I don't have the time to play all those other games and get all those other consoles. So without further ado, we're going to be going through game by game all the ones that I've played. The ones that I will not be mentioning are Assassin's Creed Altair's Chronicles, although I will make references to it, because although I will make some references to the stuff that probably happens during that game and Assassin's Creed Bloodlines, just because I've read some of the novels, and I know that a lot of what happens during Bloodlines and Altair's Chronicles are in the novels, or in the Secret Crusade novel. I will not be going over Assassin's Creed 2 Discovery. I will not be going over Assassin's Creed 3 Liberation. I will not be going over Assassin's Creed Rogue. I will not be going over Assassin's Creed Identity. I will not be going over Assassin's Creed Unity. I will not be going over, although for Assassin's Creed Unity, I would like to explain to you why I never played Unity. Assassin's Creed Chronicles China is something I will not be going over. Assassin's Creed Chronicles India I will not be going over, and Assassin's Creed Chronicles Russia I will not be going over. Alright, so without further ado, let's talk about Assassin's Creed 1. So, in Assassin's Creed 1, the premise is something that hooked me on the series pretty much immediately. Now, I'm not the kind of person who goes around shouting about conspiracy theories and how everything is a conspiracy theory and how everything is based on, Illuminati and secret society and stuff like that. I've never been that kind of person. I've always found the premise of it interesting, though. So that's probably the reason why this series hooked me pretty much immediately. I like learning about behind the scenes stuff and hidden societies and shit like that. I don't necessarily believe that it's all real, but I found it really interesting. And I found like the whole brotherhood thing interesting. Like there's this group of people who's fighting to protect free will and civil liberties, and then there's this group of people who wants to stop that group of people who want civil liberties and wants order instead of freedom. And I found that really interesting because it's such a controversial subject. Like, violence versus order and free will versus order. Because one could argue that free will makes you more prone to violence, or free will makes it to where violence is more probable, whereas one could argue that order makes violence less probable. So that's a very interesting sort of question that the series raised for me, and it made it to where this series isn't so completely and utterly black and white. So, I mean, it's pretty obvious who's the good guys and who's the bad guys in Assassin's Creed or who you're supposed to see as the bad guys because you play as assassins, but one of the things that I do appreciate about this series, that I appreciate still even to this day, is that it makes you think a little bit. It makes you go, are you really playing as the good guys? And that's a question that's raised a lot towards the end of this game. As far as the plot goes, I like the whole fact that you're playing as... Hold up. I like the fact that you're playing as someone who... I have to think about this. How I word this. I have to think about... I like the fact that you're playing... The assassin that you play as is someone who is actually a demonstration of the counter to the Assassin's Creed, like the creed itself. Like, he breaks all three tenets of the creed. You're not supposed to murder innocent people. You are supposed to hide in plain sight, and I forgot what the third one was. Jesus. Hold on. I'm gonna release this as a podcast. If you guys want me to, edit it in the future and shit, that's fine. Never compromise the Brotherhood. That's the one I was thinking of. Never bring harm upon the Brotherhood. Have the wiki pulled up. Yeah, the actions of one must never bring harm to all. If an assassin failed in his or her duty and was captured or chased, he or she must never commit any action or say anything that could be tied back to the Brotherhood or bring harm to any member of it. So, and it's really interesting because further down it talks about how the assassins seek to promote peace but commit murder. The assassins seek to open the minds of men but require obedience to rules. And the assassins seek to reveal the danger of blind faith yet practice it themselves. That's really interesting too, because it talks about... That's another theme throughout the games as well. Like I mentioned how it's not just a black and white thing, like the Templars versus the Assassins. Anyway, I'm getting super off track. So, Assassin's Creed 1. Basically, the plot of Assassin's Creed 1 is you play as this man who has basically been kidnapped by this company known as Abstergo. You play as Desmond Miles, person who's been kidnapped by the company of Abstergo. And it turns out that Abstergo actually secretly is part of the Templar Order, a group of people who basically wants to keep order in the world and wants to, bend people to their will and control everything. Whereas, at least that's what it's presented as at the time, who has been warring with a group of people known as the Assassins since pretty much the beginning of humanity, and the main character that you play as, Desmond Miles, is part, or at least used to be part of the Assassin's Brotherhood, but it turns out that he didn't want to live that life, so he kind of, delayed living that life and kind of ran off and didn't want to be part of it. So by the time our story starts, he's kidnapped by Abstergo, and Abstergo's goal, basically, along with keeping order, is that they have this machine that allows a person to experience the memories of their ancestor and basically what is virtual reality, like all memories that really actually happened in the game's universe. And so basically that's what you play as for the majority of the game. You play as Desmond's assassin ancestors. So the goal of searching through the memories of Desmond's ancestors is to be able to find these artifacts, which are known as Pieces of Eden, which basically, they have different abilities. Like, they're able to bend people to your will, basically. Like, the Apple of Eden is the most prominently, it's not the only one, but it's the most prominently featured and talked about sort of artifact, Piece of Eden, that can be gained through the game. So basically, it bends people to your will, like I said, and it's super... The Templars want it, and the Assassins want to hide it from the Templars, and the Assassins don't want to use it, they just want to hide it and make sure the Templars can't get it, because it's super, super dangerous. So, basically, rewind to Altair, which is, I always butcher his name, Altair, his time period, which takes place during the Third Crusade, and basically he is an assassin who breaks all three tenets of the Creed that I mentioned before, and he decides to, because he breaks all three tenets of the Creed, he doesn't decide to, the Grandmaster Assassin basically decides, hey, you need to get your shit together, because he basically caused one of the other Assassin's brothers to get killed. He's like, hey, you need to get your shit together, and so he basically demotes him to a rookie assassin, and causes him to eliminate, I think it's 9 people, it's been a while since I've played it, 9 different Templars on his own with very little guidance, in order to sort of prove that he is worthy of being in the Brotherhood and prove himself again, because he basically is sent on this journey of redemption. So, and I have to say, right now, Altair is my favorite assassin. I know everybody loves Ezio, and I'll talk about Ezio in a little bit, but Altair is my favorite assassin, and it's probably because, and I'm moving on a little bit towards Assassin's Creed, Altair's Chronicles, and Assassin's Creed Bloodlines, that their territory, the games that come after. I want to say that Bloodlines is a prequel to Assassin's Creed, but I can't remember, so don't quote me on that. Basically, Assassin's Creed Bloodlines and Altair's Chronicles. The thing about them both, the reason that I like Altair so much, is that Altair feels like a very human character. Like, we've all done shit in our lives that's been questionable and been fucked up, some more than others, and it's given us a little bit of a reality check. Like, and his story is a very human one, and it's about making mistakes, and yeah, everybody's entitled to make mistakes, and we're all going to make mistakes, but it's how you handle the mistakes afterwards that sort of define who you are. And so with Bloodlines and Altair's Chronicles and the book, you realize more, and this is why I actually wish that they would remake. I wish that they hadn't released like a remaster of the Ezio trilogy. I wish that they would have sort of kind of reworked some of the first Assassin's Creed now that the novel is out, because Altair's character is so interesting if you read the novel. Like, there's so much shit in the novel that, and I know it came out after the game was released, but there's so much shit in the novel that's never brought up in the game and never touched on in the game. And you realize sort of kind of why he's the way that he is when the game starts out. Because he doesn't, in the novel, and I'm not going to spoil it for people who do want to read the novel, there's all these different things that happen before he becomes an assassin that have him think that make him think that he's better than everyone else, and make him think that he can't trust anybody else. So I totally I see why he's the way that he is, like, whenever it starts out. It doesn't justify it, I'm not justifying it, but I'm kind of like, okay, it makes sense for his character development. And so, oh man, I wish that they would rework some of that into the first game, because it was so... I loved the novel, like, I really, really did, because it humanized him in such a way that the game wasn't able to do. So, I love Altair, I love his backstory, I love his character, and he kind of goes on to become the assassin who lays out the framework for, like, the modern assassin brotherhood. So, he comes up with all these different inventions and all these different practices that the assassins practice. And so, fast forward, I've talked about Assassin's Creed 1 for way too long now. Assassin's Creed 2. Basically, Desmond has decided... Sorry, I needed to pause for a second. Desmond has been... He's been getting to know a girl, a Templar girl, who works at Abstergo by the name of Lucy. She's been sort of watching over him during the events of Assassin's Creed 1. Well, it turns out in Assassin's Creed 2 that she's really been helping the Assassin's Brotherhood. So she rescues him from Abstergo and takes him to this warehouse where she basically decides, with other assassins, that, hey, we want to train you and make you into one of us. And he's, after everything that's been done to him through the events of the first game, he's a little bit more on board with it. So he decides that he is going to train via their Animus, because they have their own version of the Animus. He decides that he's going to train with something called the Bleeding Effect, which is basically the abilities of his ancestors, or sort of bleeding into him, like the ability to parkour and free run and sword fight and all this other shit is kind of like bleeding into him, which is really interesting. I've always thought it was really interesting. So, Assassin's Creed 2, he basically decides to go back into the Renaissance era, and in order to learn the abilities of his ancestors. And so, Assassin's Creed 2 is probably the most loved game in the entire series. Because it features Ezio, who's probably the most loved assassin, I'd say. Everybody, when they think of Assassin's Creed, probably thinks of Ezio, because he's like the comic relief assassin, at least starting out. He's very comic relief, and he's very, very, he's not your conventional guy that you think would be an assassin. So basically what happens to Ezio is that his dad is an assassin, but there's all these people who are sort of like working against him and working against all these Templars in Italy. I forgot to mention that it takes place in Italy, Renaissance Italy, but losing my voice. Renaissance Italy. So basically, with Renaissance Italy, he decides, or his parents, I have to think, his brothers and his dad who was an assassin, they all get murdered, under, like, these circumstances where, someone that the dad knew, betrayed them and secretly was a Templar, so they all get murdered. So basically, Ezio goes on this revenge quest that involves him murdering everybody who was responsible for the death of his two brothers and his father, and because of that, he basically ends up uncovering this whole big Templar conspiracy and ends up uncovering like things about the Pieces of Eden. Like the Apple of Eden was mentioned at the end of Assassin's Creed 1, but this is the game where we learn, I think, for real, like the meaning of it. Like, so because at the end of the game we find out that there was actually this race of people who existed before humans, and they're gone, but they're basically the ones who are responsible for the Pieces of Eden. So, I love Assassin's Creed 2. I really, really do. It is one of the best games that I have ever played. But I think it shouldn't have gotten as popular as it was, because, well, I'm glad that it got as much recognition as it deserved. I feel like it's because of this game's massive success that I feel like Ubisoft sort of looked at it and went, we could make an entire fucking franchise out of this. We could milk the shit out of this game because everybody loves this game so much, and that is exactly what they did. Like, I love Assassin's Creed 2, don't get me wrong. But I feel like Assassin's Creed 2, I just wish that this series wouldn't have blown up as much as it did. Because I feel like... anyway, let me move on to Brotherhood and Revelations, because that's where this is sort of going to be a little bit more apparent. First of all, though, when talking about Brotherhood, I have to mention that Assassin's Creed Brotherhood is my favorite game in the series. So, the reason that Assassin's Creed Brotherhood is my favorite game in the series is because I felt like all the mechanics that we had loved from the previous games were still included in this game, but they were all built upon in the way that games should be built on. And then there was all this new stuff that was actually functional. And I didn't play the multiplayer, so I'm not talking about the multiplayer whenever I said this. I was already, I was into the series after this had already come out, so I'd never played the multiplayer. But I feel like this is the game that should have honestly defined the series. And I feel like that people talk about how much they love Assassin's Creed 2, and I love Assassin's Creed 2, but Brotherhood is the game where I feel like all the cogs were in complete motion, and like I would easily call it a 10 out of 10 game. Like I feel like that this was the first game that I completely 100%ed, if I remember correctly, because I played it so much. It was by far my favorite. Now, Assassin's Creed Brotherhood is really interesting because we're going back into Desmond is going back into the past to find out what happens to the Apple of Eden, because it turns out that that I have to remember. See, it's been a while since I've played, so like there's some names and shit that I forgot that I have to look up. Hold on. Ah! Sorry, 1 second. Well, okay, so Pope Alexander VI, or Rodrigo Borgia. Okay. Rodrigo Borgia is basically in possession, if I remember correctly, in possession of the Apple of Eden. And he's basically the Templar who was responsible for, overall, like, responsible for the death of Ezio's family. So, and his son is groomed to be a Templar as well. If I remember correctly. It has been such a long fucking time since I've played these. But, basically, Ezio goes on a mission to basically, assassinate, Pope Alexander VI, which is Rodrigo Borgia, and his son Cesare Borgia. So, and he enlists the help of Leonardo da Vinci, Machiavelli, all these different people, historical figures. So, really, really good game. And it's so funny because I loved this game the most, but this is actually, the more that I think about it, this is actually the game where the plot I remember the least. It's so interesting because I loved it so much, but now that I'm sitting here thinking about it, I actually remember so little about the actual story. I'll have to replay it because I know the story is pretty good, at least from what I remember. But like, I guess that's probably the reason why so many people like the second game the most, because the story is a little bit more memorable. So I can agree with that. The story is definitely a little bit more memorable for the second game and the first game and Revelations. So I could totally see where they're coming from. And I guess maybe it's more that I like the gameplay more in Brotherhood because it's so fucking fun. So I'll have to replay Brotherhood and just sort of figure that out. I do remember the modern story very well because basically what happens is they go to Ezio's villa, which is basically set up from the second game, in order to find, if I remember correctly, I'm trying to remember, find the Apple of Eden. And Desmond basically gets possessed by one of the people, the beings, like the race that came before, and she basically forces him to kill Lucy, the girl who's been helping him out from Abstergo, whenever it turns out that she's actually not helping him, she's actually a Templar. So, like, she started out as seeming as a Templar, then seemed like she was an assassin, but no, she was really a Templar. So it was she basically was a double agent. She was playing both sides of the fence the entire time. So fast forward, I love Brotherhood. I'll have to fucking remember the plot, I guess. But fast forward to Assassin's Creed Revelations, which is the last time in the series that I really felt like I loved it as much as I did. Assassin's Creed Revelations is a game that makes me sad. Because I feel like this is where the series should have ended. Because it was so finite. Yes, the ending made it obvious for a sequel, but there were so many things in it that were finite. It was so... I want to say that now that I think about it, I loved Revelations just a little bit more than Brotherhood. Just a tiny bit more than Brotherhood. And I know for many people, it's not their favorite. It's rated less than Brotherhood and 2, but I want to say that because this game managed to impact me. It really did. It's probably the game in the series that made me, like, the most emotional, and it makes me so angry because I feel like that it should have ended here. It needed to have ended here, or at least they should have found a way to end it here. So, Assassin's Creed Revelations takes place after Desmond has accidentally killed Lucy, and it takes place inside his mind. The assassins on the outside, as well as Desmond's father, who finds them, who was an assassin, or is an assassin as well. He helps. Basically, what happens to Desmond's mind as it becomes this fractured place that Desmond can use to go into the Animus. It's called Animus Island. I'm not explaining it very well, but it makes sense when you play the game. Because Desmond is in a coma after what happened to him. So, at the end of Brotherhood. So, basically what happens is that he ends up going into Ezio's memories for basically the last time. And Ezio's goal is to, in turn, go into Altair's memories because he finds these, he's basically figured out that the last known location of the Apple of Eden is in Altair's, Yeah, okay, at this point I should mention there are 2 Apples of Eden. And I'm just now remembering that. There's 2 Apples of Eden. So there's one in Altair's library. I think there's 2 Apples of Eden. Hold on, let me Google, sorry. Sorry. Yeah, there's more than one. Okay, that's right. Okay. So, one of the Apples of Eden happens to be in a library that Altair ended up sealing before he died. Basically, he ended up sealing it, and there's all these different keys that that Ezio needs to find in order to be able to open it and find it. And I think that at this point, I can't remember exactly, I think that Ezio doesn't know that there's an Apple of Eden in there. I think that he's hoping to find some wisdom from Altair and find out what to do. I don't remember for sure. He might have known about it. It's been a while, but like I said, I keep saying that, but basically he wants to get into Altair's library, and the whole game is about him finding these keys that will let him into Altair's library. And so he ends up he goes and he meets all these different people, like this guy named Yusuf and this girl named Sophia, who he ends up falling in love with. And he ends up meeting them, and they help him find the keys to Altair's library in Masyaf, which is where the Brotherhood used to be, but they're nobody's in the castle anymore. It's been since the 1200s since anybody's been in that castle. So, what ends up happening is he ends up going through all the keys that he finds let him see a vision of the things that happened to Altair before the castle was invaded by Templars. I think it was Templars. And because I probably have a lot more emotional attachment to this game because Altair is my favorite assassin. And it was so cool to be able to go and experience some of the things that happened to him and be able to revisit him and play as him for at least a little bit longer. So that's probably the reason why I have a lot of emotional attachment, because like I said, he's my favorite character. And just the way that this game gets to me, I feel like, is because it's so... the ending is so cinematic and is so final. Like, everything about it is so fucking final. Like, with the exception of Desmond's story, it's so final. So, Ezio's story gets wrapped up. Ezio basically decides to leave the Apple of Eden in the library, if I remember correctly. He leaves it there, and he says, you should stay here. I don't want anything to do with this. I'm done with dealing with this. I haven't been able to have the life that I've wanted to have. It's time for me to stop being an assassin, and it's time for me to sort of move on with my life. And he wants to spend the rest of his life with Sophia, and he wants to be able to be happy. So he basically drops all his weapons and decides, I'm going to not give up being an assassin, but I'm going to live my life from now on. So, and then he finds the skeleton of Altair, who left the Apple of Eden. So it's sad because it's Altair's death, and then it's sad because Ezio's story comes to an end. And it's wrapped up in this way that it's sad, but it feels like it, because both of their stories come to an end. You get closure on their stories. And I feel like because there's this closure, I know that there's a film for Assassin's Creed Revelations, at least a short film for Assassin's Creed Revelations, that's like the final thing for Ezio, but even if that hadn't been made, I would have been satisfied with, the way that Ezio's story ended. So basically, that gets wrapped up, and then Desmond is visited by the people who came before, the people who, the race that came before, and they tell him, hey, your world is going to end. You need to find, Okay, you need to find this area that you can go into, that you can unlock. I think you can unlock it with the Apple of Eden, and basically, you'll be able to stop the end of the world, because they show him this vision of when their world ended. And it's probably one of the most depressing cutscenes I have ever seen in a video game. Like, it genuinely made me sad. So that's the one thing I love about Revelations. Like, Revelations is just a sad game. It's just sad. Like, there's so much shit that happens where you're just like, I'm sad now. And so that it's sort of wrapped up that way and then Desmond wakes up from his coma. And I feel like it's so odd. I usually hate when stories end and, like, it ends on a note where, like, it's a cliffhanger and you don't know what happens, and if you don't know if they really, really go through with it. And I'm probably gonna get some flack for saying this, but I would have actually been okay with that in this situation, because it wrapped up Ezio's story and Altair's story, and while that wouldn't have wrapped up Desmond's story, it's kind of one of those things where it's like, if it had been written in the right way, and if it had been done the right way, I would have been satisfied with not knowing whether or not they stopped the end of the world, and not knowing if they win. Like, it would have been finite, because it would have been this thing where it would have been a finite, two character stories are already wrapped up, let's leave it ambiguous. Do they do it? Do they don't? Do they not do it? Because the common thing of Assassin's Creed is that there's no end to this war. There's no end to assassins fighting each other, and assassins fighting Templars, and Templars fighting assassins. There's not ever going to be an end. As the series continues to establish several times. So I would have been really okay with it not it not saying anything and it not saying what happens. And like, I would have, in this situation, because it happened to be such a finite, wrapped up little package, for the most part, I would have been okay if it had never made another one. Or if it had found a way to end it where kind of like, I'm trying to think of an example. Like, in the way that Desmond was sort of like, we'll find a way to make this work. We'll find a way to, I don't know how we're going to do this, but together we'll find a way to make it work. It wouldn't have been the best ending ever. I know people would have been pissed off about it. But I feel like, considering what happens later in the series, I feel like this should be the last game. Should have been the last game. So I'm going to stop talking about Revelations now, and I'm going to move on to Assassin's Creed 3, which is the first game in the series that actually pissed me off. Like, and probably because of that, it's one of my least favorite games in the series. It really is. So, next, Assassin's Creed 3 starts out with Desmond and the other assassins, Sean and Rebecca, and his dad, all going to this temple that I mentioned before, where they can stop the end of the world. Basically, the disaster that wiped out, the same disaster that wiped out the people who came before, years and years and years ago. So they go there with the goal of hopefully finding a way to access the entrance of the temple and be able to stop the end of the world. So, Desmond basically, in order to figure out how to open the temple, he goes through the memories of, of Connor Kenway, which, that's not his real name, but I don't want to butcher his actual name. He's a Native American, / British assassin. At first, though, he doesn't go through the memories of Connor. He goes through the memories of someone else by the name of Haytham Kenway, who happens to be Connor's father. Finding out that Connor's father is actually a Templar, who had a relationship with a Native American woman by the name of Zio, and a Mohawk woman specifically by the name of Zio, and left before Haytham left before Connor was born, I believe. And so what happens is the Templars, who want to push people off, push the Native Americans off the land and find access to, because the Mohawk land, if I remember correctly, and the Iroquois land is on the site for the temple that Desmond in modern day is trying to access in order to stop the end of the world. So, if I remember correctly, they push the Mohawks off the land and try to get into the temple, basically, if I remember correctly. I keep saying that. And so they try to get into the temple, and that it's just a boring game. It really is. I know the plot sounds halfway decent whenever you, say it out, but it's just the way that it's executed. It just, in my opinion, was just so... I liked it at first, but then, the second time around that I played it, I realized, how little I actually cared. How humorless this entire story is, and how overly serious it is, and how I almost feel like this story takes itself too seriously at this point. The great thing about Ezio's story is, there were serious moments. Revelations was... I actually love Revelations because it was one of the more serious games in the series, but it had its moments of humor and of joy, and it wasn't this complete, dark thing where just one bad thing after another keeps happening to this character. And that's the thing about Connor, is I like Connor as a character. I really, really do. He's a cool assassin, and I really do like him as a character, but I don't like in story writing and storytelling when you keep having all these bad things happen to this character just over and over and over again, and it goes nowhere, basically. And then all he has to show for it at the end, after being through all this shit, is like nothing. Like nothing happens. Like nothing gets solved at the end of this game, I feel. Like for Connor's arc, nothing gets solved, and he gets the revenge on the guy who ended up killing his mother and setting fire to his village, but it doesn't change anything. Like his people still have to move off their land. And like, I know that it's a way of storytelling that's like, well, sometimes shit just happens. It's like real life, shit just happens and you can't prevent it. And I get that, but it's like, that's not the way that this... It's overly serious. Like, it isn't, there's not a shred of hope in this entire game for me. And other than, like, the homestead sections where you get to, like, take care of all of Connor's people and, like, talk about all of Connor's, take care of Connor's people and, like, make friends with the people on the homestead, which, by the way, are the most interesting parts of the game, not even the assassin stuff. Like, this, like, all the homestead stuff and taking care of your land is the most interesting part of the game for me, and that's kind of sad. So, hold on, let me take a sip of my coffee. I've been talking for, like, an hour. Pardon me. Okay, so... for me, that's just my opinion. At least when all this bad shit was happening to Altair in the novel, it was to set up his character development, and I just feel like, from a character standpoint, throughout the entire game, Connor does not change. He has the same goals the entire game. He doesn't change or at least from what I remember, his character doesn't change or go through any sort of development. The only development that I could think of that he kind of goes through is, again, with the homestead. He's nice to the people who are in his homestead, but he doesn't care. He just doesn't seem to change other than that little aspect. So that's probably why it was so stilted and not as interesting to me. So I have to say that's not even close to being the thing that pissed me off about this game, though. The thing that pissed me off about this game was the ending, and I think that a lot of people who have played it can agree. It's not Mass Effect 3 levels bad, okay? It's not, like, by any stretch. I don't even think the Mass Effect 3 ending is that bad. Yes, it's bad. It's not that bad. It could be worse. It really could have been worse, guys. It really could have been. It was really bad. I would give it an F, but I wouldn't, or at least a low D, but not, like, it wasn't that bad. It's not a 0, okay? It's at least, like, a 40 or a 50. So, excuse me. The ending of this game, is probably the moment for me that I feel like that this series completely lost me. Because the thing about Assassin's Creed is, yes, the main meat of the games has always been going through, the memories of Desmond's ancestors, and reliving those memories and playing as them for the majority of the game. But Assassin's Creed 3, other than the ancestral memories, is the first time that we see Desmond acting like an assassin and going on assassin missions and shit like that. Like, you literally get to go and do the things that you would have done as Ezio or Altair or Connor, and you get to go and actually be an assassin. And that's where other than the homestead missions, that I actually loved this game. Like, those are the moments I actually enjoyed playing through a lot more. Because, for me, character development is such an important thing for me in video games. Especially because Desmond started out as this person who he didn't want to be an assassin. He didn't want anything to do with it. And finally, by the time of Assassin's Creed 3, he realizes this is bigger than me. This is bigger than what I want. We have to save everybody. We have to find a way to save everybody. So I feel like Assassin's Creed 3 had raised the most potential for his character that any of the other games had ever done. Because this is the first time where we see Desmond, has been the least selfish and the most selfless. Like, his character development is the best it's ever been in this game. And it's such a damn shame because this game takes all that potential that he had and just throws it in the fucking trash. It really does. So, the ending of this game is basically the ones who came before, the people who lived before, the race. One of them, her name is Juno. She comes to Desmond and she tells him, he's faced with this pedestal after they open the doors to the temple, and she's like, if you put your hand on the pedestal, you will be able to stop the world from ending. This is the only way that you will be able to stop the world from ending, which is stupid in itself, because why would that one thing stop the world from ending? Like, putting your hand on a pedestal, why would that stop the world from ending? Like, they got wiped out by a massive fucking solar flare. Like, how would that stop the world from ending? How would that stop a solar flare? I'm sure that there was some sort of explanation behind it, but I can't remember what it is, so it just sounds stupid whenever I say it out loud now. What was I gonna say? And then she goes, or you could choose to hide out here and be safe and not put your hand on the pedestal and not sacrifice yourself. By the way, the pedestal will kill him if he puts his hand on it. Not sacrifice yourself, and then you could emerge from the temple, gather the little survivors that you find, and basically become their Jesus. Which is literally, like, the way that this game... It doesn't say that, but it presents itself like that. You could become their Jesus, and you'll become their idol, and whenever you die, they'll fight over you, and they'll fight over whether your teachings were right or wrong, and it'll just be this endless cycle of death and destruction, and nobody will have learned from their mistakes. And either way, this is so fucking stupid to me, because, like, honestly, I would have preferred... I know that a bunch of people would have died, but the way that this game presents it, it almost, like, feels like... I don't know. It's so dumb. It's like, you spend all this time presenting his character development and, like, presenting his character and saying that this is his story. Like, yes, it's been about the ancestors too, but whenever it all comes back to it, this is Desmond's story. And you train him for games, and you build him up for games and games to have some sort of epic face-off against the Templars and become, like, an epic assassin. And the way that the decision that ultimately he has to make at the end is to sacrifice himself in order to save everybody else, or to live and basically cause people to do the same thing that they've been doing for years and years and years. So, it's bullshit, honestly, because it doesn't make sense in the way that, how would that fucking save the world? Either way, either way, it's bullshit. You spend all this time building him up towards this epic, like, epic story, and then it ends up going nowhere, because what he ends up doing is he ends up sacrificing himself to save everybody else. And he ends up dying, and the game ends. And I feel like, I don't know, that was the first time in the series where I was like, you fucked up. You really fucked up. And I'm not just mad because I did like his character and he died, but I'm mad because I feel like this is the time where the story completely broke. Because I don't feel like it's, unless you fucking are going to end the series that you're working on, I don't feel like you should ever kill off the main character. I know of a series, I haven't read it, called Divergent, for example, is a series where the main protagonist gets killed off, and then it goes to the point of view of someone else. And a lot of the time, it's done for shock value. And that's, like, unless you completely know what you're doing, and you completely know, like, the series is going to end, I feel like there's no reason for this to ever happen. Because, like, the protagonist is someone we want to root for if they're likable enough. And sometimes, and I know, and sometimes it just happens in series, and it's a way of, well, sometimes it just happens to characters, and they don't always get the treatment that they deserve, and that's just a realistic way of writing. Well, yeah, but, like, okay, their character arc isn't resolved, and, like, you're gonna piss off their fans, and, like, it's just not good writing. Like, even if you're trying to be, there's a difference between being realistic and trying to be edgy. Like, first of all, the realism in this game has been thrown out the window since the first game, basically. So don't even try to feed me shit about how this game is just trying to be realistic. It's not realistic. You can fucking run on, like fucking, I don't know, like, you could fall from a fucking building into a haystack. This game is not realistic. It's a video game. So don't try to give me that shit. It's just the one thing about the series that has always been problematic is that characters just get killed off for shock value, to elicit an emotional reaction out of people. So, like, this is a prime example of that. And there are parts in the series where it does work. Like, it really does work. Like, for example, when Ezio's former girlfriend from way, way back, who I haven't talked about up to this point, before he meets Sophia in Assassin's Creed Revelations, he falls in love with this girl by the name of Christina Vespucci, and she ends up dying because of the Templars. She ends up getting murdered. That's a scene in the series that works. But this is just, Desmond's death is some sort of weird Jesus symbolism that this series really didn't need, and has really, honestly, up to this point, gone completely against. Because one of the things that the series, or at least from the assassin standpoint, preaches is anti-religion, and, like, it preaches freedom to think how you want, but it also thinks that one of the things that's been preached throughout the series is that religion is a way to control people. And Desmond's death is, like, this obvious, like, blatant Jesus symbolism. And I just, it's so contradictory, and it's so, I feel they should have, if they were going to do this, like, I don't like this. I feel like this is the pivotal moment in the series where the plot died, at least for the modern, and a lot of people would agree with this. At least for the modern story, where the plot sort of died and lost me. So that's the game that pissed me off. Desmond's character development went no fucking nowhere. It was just, ugh. So the next one that I'll be talking about, and I'm getting closer to the end here, is Assassin's Creed Black Flag. And I played it, but the only reason that I played it was because I actually ended up getting it as a present. This is the point in the series where I had just sort of accepted that the series had lost me. It's an enjoyable game. It really was. I played it more. This is the time where I actually started to play the multiplayer. And I'm not going to say there aren't characters that I like in this game. I really did. James Kidd / Mary Read, for example, being one of them. But it's just... it sucks. I really, really, really did want to keep liking the series, and I really, really did want to keep playing, but I feel like that they wanted to make a pirate game, and I know this is a very popular opinion about this game. They wanted to make a pirate game, and they succeeded in making a really good pirate game, but I don't like the protagonist. I don't like Edward Kenway. His character is just the kind of character that annoys me. The assassins thing was such a second fiddle in this game, and I feel like if it had been more of like a spin-off or something like that, I would have enjoyed it way more, but it was just, the plot was really incoherent to me. And again, I actually never finished this one too, because I couldn't be bothered. It just didn't interest me. And I was still, and I'll admit, I was still salty about Assassin's Creed 3, so, I would play it again just for, like, the sailing was fun, and, like, the actual gameplay itself is fun. But if you're like me, you play games more for the story, and this is the point where it lost me as far as the story goes. You can't play as Desmond because Desmond's dead in the modern universe. You just play as some random Abstergo employee testing the Animus, so didn't care for it. If you like it, nothing wrong with it. Nothing wrong with that. If you liked Assassin's Creed 3, nothing wrong with that. It's just for me personally, I couldn't get into it. I have to skip now Rogue and Identity, because I never played them. So, and I have to skip Unity, although I will say that the reason that I never played Unity was not because of an actual story thing, but of a marketing thing that did. This is the point where I dropped the series completely for a while. For about a year and a half, I dropped the series just completely, and I've never played Unity. I may never play it. Ubisoft's the way that they marketed this, and maybe this is my bad, but the way that I understood the way that they marketed this is that there was supposed to be 4 different protagonists. And apparently that there were just multiplayer versions of the same protagonist, and they were based on the game's customizability. So, customizability, words. And so that annoyed me, and it wasn't what I thought it was going to be. I actually was excited for this game too. I was like, okay, maybe it'll be good. And that was a little thing that turned me off to it. I'm not saying that the game is the worst thing ever. I've heard it's one of the most buggy pieces of shit ever. But that's probably the main reason where I was like, oh, well, I guess I'm not getting back into it. Fast forward to 2015. Assassin's Creed Syndicate. Didn't care about it, didn't know anything about it. I just knew that it originally was supposed to be called Assassin's Creed Victory, I believe, because it takes place in Victorian era. So first things first, I'd like to say I've still never finished this game. But weirdly enough, even with the way that they've been pumping these games out every year, unnecessarily, they managed to make a game that I really, really like. Because this game is so... The reason why I like this game is... one of the problems that I had with Assassin's Creed 3, as I mentioned, is it takes itself way too fucking seriously. And Assassin's Creed Syndicate does not at all. You basically play as two main characters, two new assassins. I don't even know what's going on in the fucking modern plot because of Unity, so don't ask me. And that's honestly, at this point, I don't even care. Because it's been thrown out the window for me for a long time. But Evie and Jacob are two of the best protagonists that the series has had, in my opinion. Because Jacob is a terrible assassin, but he's awesome. His sense of humor is 100% my sense of humor. This dry, sarcastic sense of humor, totally me. And then how Evie's the smart one who has to sort of keep him in line and keep him from hurting himself because she's a lot more stealthy. I like that it gives you these different play styles to choose from. You don't have to play Jacob as this like loud-mouthed or like loud brawler who likes to get shit done and who's abrasive. You could play him as sneaky, and you don't have to play her as sneaky. So it has these different play styles, and it's more of, at this point, a little bit of an RPG. Like, there's a progression system, and that's been a thing in the games, but it's never been, honestly, since Brotherhood as I want to say forefront, and this game actually reminds me of Brotherhood in a lot of ways. I feel like that this is... I don't know why it reminds me so much of Brotherhood, but maybe because it takes place in one city, like Brotherhood did, but it's so interesting, and like the scenery is pretty. The story isn't the best thing ever written, but like it made me excited because it felt like that they were trying new things, and it felt like that they weren't taking themselves too seriously, and it felt like that I don't know why, it just feels like it was they put so much care into this game that they haven't for a while. Like, it feels like that they cared about their two main characters. And it's, like, it's got some moments in it where I'm just like, that was funny. Like, that legitimately made me laugh. So, writing's getting a little bit better, than it's been in a while. Is it the greatest game ever? No, not by any means, but I'll defend it. Like, it's better than Black Flag. It's better than 3. So maybe they're in a step of the right direction. I don't think that at this point the modern plot can have any coherent consistency or have any sort of fixes. I think that at this point it's just completely fucking broken. Just my opinion. At this point, I'm going to talk about the movie, as I mentioned at the beginning of this really long-ass podcast. I don't even know how long this has been going, but it's been going for a fucking while. So, the movie. Whenever I heard that this was going to be a thing, I read something about how it was supposed to be based off the first game, which pissed me off because Michael Fassbender, the guy, the lead role, I have to keep burping, I'm sorry, doesn't look anything like Altair. You know, doesn't look anything like anyway, doesn't look anything like Altair, and doesn't. But I thought that he was going to be the lead role, and I thought that that was going to be it. So I'm glad that they kind of went with their own original story for this movie. I'm not going to spoil it. I'm not going to talk about much of the plot because if you want to go see it. This is a very divisive movie. The people that I know who have seen it, like my friends and everything who have seen it, told me it's a good movie. You should go see it. Because I originally wasn't going to go see it because I follow Rotten Tomatoes, so I know a lot of movie scores. And I'm not saying Rotten Tomatoes is always right, and I always take Rotten Tomatoes at its word, but I do tend to, since it's an aggregate of critics, I do tend to trust it. So I saw that the score for the Assassin's Creed movie was super low, and I'm like, I'm not even gonna go bother to see it. I love this series, but like at this point, I'm not even surprised if the movie's bad, because the series has been declined for a while now, because they keep pushing out these games every year. Last year, 2016, they didn't release like a main game in the series. I know they released like some PS Vita games. They didn't release the main game because they wanted to take more time to work on it. Good for you, Ubisoft. It feels like that they're trying to head in a step in the right direction, at least for the moment. I feel like Assassin's Creed Syndicate was definitely a step in the right direction, but the movie, I could totally see why people who aren't fans of the series, and especially critics, don't like this movie. As I was sitting there in the theater with my brother, I totally understood it. I totally understood why they don't like it. I totally understood why it's off-putting to people. I totally get it. But as a fan of the series, it made me literally so fucking happy. Because I feel like, okay, first, before I talk about why I liked the movie, I have to talk about two criticisms I had of it. I feel like if they had developed the side characters a little bit more and made the side characters a little bit more interesting, it would have been a better movie, for sure. It would have brought the movie up for a few points. There are these characters in the movie who they exist, and I do think that they would be genuinely interesting to learn about. Specifically, one of the female assassins. She's so fucking cool, but I don't even think they say her name in the film. Like, I had to Google what her name was. So that would have been interesting. And that they kill off a character that had like the most unnecessary death ever. So those are my two big criticisms of the movie. And one thing that I was going to say was a criticism was that I felt like the plot was really simple. But then the more that I thought about it, the more that I realized that this is such a huge, complex series. If they had tried to stuff the plot of a huge, complex series like this into a 2-hour movie, the film would have suffered for it. It sure would have. Unless it was done precisely the right way. It would have suffered for it. So, I'm glad that they didn't try to do that. I'm glad that they kind of went with the simple, they're trying to find this thing, that he goes into the Animus plot, as they did with the first game, which it kind of mirrored the first game in that sense, like completely different characters, and it was very different from the first game, don't get me wrong, it was super different, but like I could see like they kind of tried to mirror that plot a little bit, so good on them for not making it overly complicated, and good on them for not trying to overstuff a movie. Like, I think that they knew that this was going to not be, like, the biggest movie of the year and wasn't going to be a complete and utter success, since video game to movie adaptations are notoriously terrible. This was not, in my opinion, notoriously terrible. I would give this film... The thing that gives this film points for me is that this film genuinely seemed like people gave a shit. The people who were in it gave a shit about the series and gave a shit about the source material, because there were all these moments where I'm like, I can't believe they included that, or I can't believe they made reference to that, or no. Like, I can't believe that they made reference to certain things. Like, there were, like, I saw it and I looked at my brother in the theater and I was like, I can't believe they referenced that. And I can't believe, and my friend is like 100% sure that he has, that the main character has an ancestor that's in one of the games. And I'm like, I'll have to rewatch it because I didn't even notice that. So, like, there were all these little things that were really cool. And, like, the action scenes were the fucking best. Like, the fighting choreography was so fucking cool. Like, it really, really... There wasn't a moment in this movie I was bored, by the way. I usually don't like action movies, especially... I don't like Michael Bay, for example, because I went to go see a very, very long time ago, whenever I was just a wee fox, I went to go see Transformers Dark of the Moon with my family, and it was so boring, but, like, it was so boring. There was just all these nonsensical action scenes. And in this, the action is easy to follow. It's interesting. And the fucking music is the fucking best. It really is. Like, I loved it so much. And I kept thinking that throughout the entire movie. Like, I want this soundtrack now. Like, it was so interesting. So, is it the greatest movie ever? No. No. Let's get that straight for a second. It was not the greatest movie ever. But as a fan of this series, and as someone who has been a fan for years now, it was literally everything I wanted, everything I could have hoped for. Was it a good movie? No. Was it an Oscar-winning movie? Not in the fucking slightest. But was it a good movie for the fans? That was the thing that I went into the theater with. I tried to go into the theater with low expectations, expecting that it might be a giant piece of shit, but not trying to rag on it or anything. I was very pleasantly surprised. I know it's gotten super negative reviews, and I know that a lot of people don't like this movie, but I was pleasantly shocked by how much I did enjoy this movie, and how much attention to detail there was in this movie, and how, like, is it the greatest movie ever? No, but, like, I was genuinely shocked about how much these people seem to care about the source material, and how much they seem to care about the series. So, the thing about it is Assassin's Creed good now? Is Assassin's Creed making a bounce back? Does Ubisoft care about the series again? I'd say it seems like they are trying to with this movie. It seems like that with Syndicate, it seemed like they were genuinely trying. It seems like the fact that they're taking more time to work on a new game instead of just pushing it out the same year. I know that they released the PS Vita games, but they're not part of, like, the main series, so I guess I can give them a little bit of a pass. The fact that they're taking more time, I feel like someone on the team is learning a little bit that people aren't going to be satisfied with the same shit that we've been seeing, and, like, the lackluster plot line that makes no sense anymore. So I think that, can they salvage this story at this point? Probably not. It's been since 2012 that this story has not really, at least the modern story, has not really been salvageable. Can they release a good game again? Yes, they really can. Can they put it back on track? I don't know. That remains to be seen. I'll be getting the next game with the hopes, cautious optimism. It seems like they're caring, at least for now. about this series, and it seems like with the movie and Syndicate and the fact that they're taking more time, it seems like they're genuinely trying to steer this series back in the right direction. So can it get there? I don't know. Let me know what you guys think. I've been talking for like way over an hour. I'm not even sure how long I've been talking, but I felt like that this was definitely something that I felt like I needed to discuss. I love the series. I don't want to see it end, but I feel like at a certain point something's got to give. I want them to do well, and I want that's why I get so frustrated about this series, and that's why whenever I talk to people about the series, I feel sad, because it's like it started off so strongly, and I genuinely don't want this series to keep going down a bad direction, and like people to roll their eyes every time they see that a new Assassin's Creed game is coming out, because it didn't used to be that way. When we saw Assassin's Creed 3 was coming out, everybody was excited, and then ever since then nobody's excited anymore. So can they get there? I don't know. We'll see. And if you sat through all of this, me rambling about Assassin's Creed for an hour and a half, thank you. You're the real MVP. I'll try to do something more like this in the future. Maybe I'll get another person on this so we can talk. One of my friends on this, make it a little bit more interesting other than me just talking for an hour and a half. So I hope that you enjoyed this. I'll do something like this in the future. Thank you. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and have a great day.